Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you. We can hear you.
I can hear you now with echo though. Can you try it again? Can somebody speak from there?
Here. Can you hear us now?
Something unmuted. Oh, now that's good.
Now we don't hear you.
Thank you. Oh,
Now,
thank you.
Ivy Kwan Arce is a member of our committee. Okay. I am going to try to find these things that I should have brought that I sent to you guys, but I didn't print them out, which is, we did get some requests from God's Love and The Door and Greenwich House on priorities of theirs. Does anyone have that?
I can have it on my computer. Maybe it's not that.
If I could try to get it up, because I sent it to get it up, but I sent it, but I just,
But I saw that you sent it. So
Yeah.
I'm going to choose those at the top of your email.
okay, that'd be very kind of you. That would be compensating for my sloppiness. Uh, Thank you. All right, so this, guys, this is you are a star. This is a log of meetings that we've had over the last bunch of years, which is helpful for jogging our memory. You already printed that out.
Oh, no, it's just
Sure.
here. Maybe came first.
Oh.
Just
And
documenting the papers.
possible new topics, that's another, this one was, okay, and here's another sort of a repetition of meetings that we had in the last year and some possible new topics. Yeah.
Sorry.
All right, how should I organize this meeting? Ideally,
Yeah,
I should be
have a topic
looking
here.
at what our people have asked of us. Find that.
I know,
Rachel, you have it, yes?
I managed to send it. Yeah, I just have
You
it.
have it?
Let me try to send
The
it.
email I sent to everybody this week that had. It's a good thing we started early. There was an email I sent this week.
Okay.
You have it?
I mean, you're talking about the God's love. And,
Yes. There's a God's Love and there's a Door, and I think that there's also a GH, a Greenwich House.
Oh, it says, yeah, Road to
Yes.
Academy, but that's
the
the court,
God's
right?
love one, for some reason, the PDF is
Yeah, well,
Bad?
not wonky,
All right.
but
Okay.
I think it's legible. The PDF of the
Oh, here we go,
district
here we go,
needs-
here we go, here we go. The three docs.
Read it.
Attachments.
That
come-
one was.
Yes, I got it. I think I got it. Okay, so statement. All right, so let me, okay, so the God's Love. Their request is pretty straightforward, and I think it's for a ban. Is that right? We respectfully ask for $25,000 to support our services in CB2. Yes?
But it doesn't say for anything in particular.
No,
So-
it doesn't, does it? So GL equals 25K general. I think it would be for meals for a CB2. Then let's see the Door. Okay, so $400,000 to support holistic care.
Think she's having a hard time hearing, so maybe move that closer to you.
Yeah, Abby, can you hear us now? Okay, it's just there's an air conditioning in here that's kind of noisy, but
I hear you perfect. Thank
all
you.
right, tell us if you don't. So the Door wants to have an attorney and an immigrant youth navigator and ESOL, of course, is right. And language translation services. I don't know if anybody remembers when they came to us, they said that the migrant crisis has really overwhelmed.
The door's the one's on 13.
No, the Door is the
Down.
one down on room and 6. Yeah.
Oh, okay,
It's a youth services organization.
Okay.
And they have also a charter school there.
got it.
And Kelsey Louis, who is their director, said that what has happened largely through the migrant crisis is that their attendance went down during COVID. It's been creeping back up, but lately they've had this overwhelming response, I think to 15%, I think, of needs from people who are new to New York and often don't speak the language and don't speak English and don't speak any of the traditional languages like Spanish or Mandarin, I guess. And so they were having difficulty translating. Some people speak only Wolof, which is a West African dialect, and that they had made a little booklet so people could point to the pictures of what they needed. And the organization traditionally serves people up to the age like 16 to 24, but they're being loose about the ages because they see that there's just a lot of need. So they're also seeking $150,000 for food and nutrition services, $750,000 to support the renovation of the facade. Holy cow. That's a lot of money. Okay. So 150 is food and 750K equals construction.
And then another 400K, right?
We have 400 for holistic care, 150 to expand food and nutrition, 750,000 to support the renovation of the facade. Okay. And then the third organization we heard from was Greenwich House, and is this the, no, that's not what I want. What I want is this. So Greenwich House, this will open. Let's see, funding support for the West Side Workforce Coalition. They've been working with Botcher to build up our workforce training space. Okay, these are not specific requests. Community engagement manager. They would like to hire a community engagement manager. All right, so GH. We don't know how much, but it doesn't matter. Access and opportunity to the arts, grants and public funding that helps us bring members from our older adult centers and various behavioral health spaces into our art spaces is transformed. We've begun plotting the structure. That doesn't sound like a clear request to me. Expanded enrichment and services. Okay, there's not a specific number to that, but expanded enrichment and services. And capital needs. Preservation and maintenance of the building. Okay, capital building. All right. Does anyone want to talk about any of these?
Before we do, should we maybe add a few other potential things to the list? Because I'm looking back at the list of folks who came, there were two other groups where I thought I kind of wish they had submitted something, but I think we could imagine what they might have submitted.
Yeah.
One is Red Door Place, which I think is what I would have with the door. With, you know, the rolling out of Bridging the Gap, which is an additional program they're adding on top of the food pantry work they do to connect folks coming to the pantry with other services they might need. So I wonder if we can think about supporting them on this same.
Let me just summarize for people who might not have been at that meeting. So the Red Door Place is a private organization. It's run out of the church on 13th Street and 7th Avenue. It's used to be part of the church, but now it's its own 401c3. They serve, what is 1,500 meals. It's a pantry, and then on the weekends they serve a hot meal. And they have enormous, overwhelming amount. It's one person. The staff is insanely small. And in addition to serving meals, now she started a new initiative, which is called Bridging the Gap, where she wants to be able to help people get to services that they might need. And she's doing this entirely with volunteers and managing this all by herself. So she doesn't have any city contract as far as I can as far as I know. They get their food comes from the food bank, which has a city contract. But yeah, that's a great idea.
So that's one. The next is the Manhattan Outreach Consortium and Downtown Goddard, which is a set of groups that do outreach to street homeless folks in the district and connect them to housing opportunities. The thing that really stuck out from a financial perspective for them, if I recall, I'm looking back at what we wrote about them, was the underfunding for staff positions and the fact that that leads to a 50% vacancy in their staff levels. So they don't have enough caseworkers, and the caseworkers are treating 50 people each rather than 25. I don't know. They probably can't legally augment their salaries beyond what's in the standard city things
Yeah.
within experience levels, but that was the other group that I thought we could think about serving. And actually, as we were talking about this, I wonder also if there's something we can do for Paul's Place.
Yeah, so Paul's Place, please just speak up if we're going too fast and going over material that we're familiar with and we're not.
Sorry, I actually had my hands up. When we're going over the door, like I don't know how the procedure or the options are of suggestion. I know that when Kelsey came in, he talked about like the overwhelming thing, but they also had a very interesting program where they, I guess, think tank and invested, what was it called? Social workers, to be part. I guess they're paying some of their tuition so that they could do some of the work as volunteers. So I thought that was a great opportunity of funding because they were looking at social workers that actually spoke the different languages, but they were doing mental health stuff. So I don't know if we can go back to Kelsey and say, can you budget for that over like $750,000 of cosmetic work, construction? Because that was very forward thinking, and the fact that they were able to actually see that kind of care, I think is something that if we can actually support that, it'll be significant, I think.
That's a great point. So what I was referring to is that the door told us that there's a shortage across the city of social workers, people with licenses to be social workers. And the door, with a private philanthropic gift, approached NYU. And whereas getting a social worker's degree normally costs about $110,000, they have approached NYU with a certain amount of money, and the people who will enroll to be social workers that come from the door will pay only about $15,000 in tuition. I can't remember what the exact number was, but it's, much, much less. And the idea is for them to elevate members of their staff who can then serve as licensed social workers in their
And
program.
Angie's here apparently, and from the door, attending the meeting.
Oh, let me see, because,
Yay.
yeah, where's the mouse? Oh, oh, I can? All right, if only my keypad would work. Because I'm not on Zoom.
Yeah.
Jesus, what is wrong with me? Okay, so I can go to participants and
Hi, Angie. Yay.
She's here.
Angie to review. Okay, there we go. Angie, would you
Hi,
like?
good evening.
Hi, Angie.
Yeah, good evening all. I'm Angie Toribio, the Director of Government Relations and Strategy at The Door. As you all have seen the document that we shared, those were 3 priorities that we have in mind. They are fundraising priorities for the year ahead. We thought that those would be, broad enough, general enough to bring to your attention. The facade project is underway, so we are currently completing that work and just seeking as much funding to kind of fill the gap of that project. But hearing your take on our project for the MSW program, just wanted to share, we program is underway. 14 of our staff have already started earlier this month at NYU. We have secured funding for that first cohort to complete the program, which is really wonderful. But we are now then actively given the interests, the number of staff who expressed interest in joining the program. It's obviously a really wonderful thing that we're actually collaborating with some peer organizations to replicate that model for the project on their end. So at the moment, we're just exploring options for how to continue this program for another cohort once this one does it in 2 years, hopefully.
Do you have a sense, Angie, of how much money we're talking about?
I don't have the exact number. Yeah, but I can get that for you. That's something that Gabriela Sperduto, my colleague, has worked really closely on. We have secured funding from the Cohen Foundation. We have also support from Summerfield Foundation. And so this has been predominantly funded from private funding. So yeah, this would really be wonderful if we were able to continue to explore ways to have this program, certainly given the interest in it that has come about. So
Thank you, that's very helpful. And I don't think that actually on priority budget requests, we're not required to give specific numbers. I don't think we give specific numbers.
okay.
But if you can give, I mean, I don't know how the 14 current cohort, that could be a baseline or a referral budget. Maybe if you could work out that with Kelsey and have send it to Susanna and fit it in. Because I really believe that model is so significant that other organizations can actually use it as a model for addressing the many needs right now. Thank you.
Yeah, we will certainly share that with you. I know the first or final payment are coming up in the next couple of weeks. So it's something that we're all figuring out and working through with NYU. So I can get you those numbers, Susanna, and happy to answer any other questions that come up.
Well, I want to commend you guys for having the idea. It was actually mentioned at a precinct community council meeting last night. It's an innovative idea, and congrats on being able to fund it privately.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited. Staff are attending classes and getting started, so it's really wonderful, and just excited to be able to do this and be one of the first, I think, or the first organization to do this work. So
great. And just out of curiosity, is there a requirement that these students then return and stay with the door for a certain amount of period?
Yeah, so in order to join the program, it was part of a condition. There was a contract agreed upon for the students to remain at the door for at least 2 years upon completion.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Amazing.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for raising that.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here today, exactly when we're going to talk about it.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm just going to look at this.
Can I jump?
Zach, please.
The Ryder, the underfunding for staff, can you remind me, didn't we pass a resolution about that?
Yes.
We did, right? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure we did.
I emailed everyone, I know it's not an opportune time, but I emailed everyone the documents where we talked about Red Door Place, Manhattan Outreach Consortium, and Paul's Place over the last year.
I mean, the other thing about this list that honestly is just giving me a little pause.
Yeah.
That I feel like the biggest actual needs in our district right now are still more beds, and as we're seeing more healthcare.
Yeah.
And just being frank, I don't love that to propose things in a district needs statement that don't speak to either of those. And I know we don't have organizations who have the space for more beds, so it's a little bit of a circular issue.
No, it's two different things. I think, I think, and correct me if you guys think this is wrong. We do a statement of needs. So we're gonna be prioritizing like what the top issue is for CB2.
Mm,
And last year, we were able to advocate that the top issue is the crisis of mental health, homelessness, and
Right.
substance use. It's the top, and I think that given the masses that showed up for this precinct meeting last night, I think it's very top of mind to everybody. There was a period a few years ago when the top priority for CB2 was Elizabeth Street Garden, but I think that this has really overshadowed it. And it's a little difficult because we don't actually have much of a relationship with any agency, and agencies don't really come to us.
Right.
And it's just a difficult, which is something I want to talk about, because I agree with you. I think that the place where we would like to have most impact is not something that we're actually able to do very easily. I mean, we would like more shelters, but who's the agency that we're going, I mean, who's the provider that we're going to?
But, we had a presentation and I can't remember what group it was, but they were social workers, I believe, that were on the ground in the mobile units. So supporting the people that actually know how to carve out spaces of beds is probably a really good way to be involved. And I can't remember whether they were.
I think it was, it was Alyssa Wrinkle of downtown Goddard.
And
Yeah.
to those points, I think, like, yes, obviously, if we could in this statement support something that is adding safe haven and stabilization bed capacity, that would be great. But what we can do is, to Ivy's point, support the folks that are doing outreach to street homeless folks, to connect them to the opportunities that do exist, and to support the one we have in our district, which is Paul's
Because
Place.
they're the better spot of showing us where the blind spot is when the agencies don't come to us. Because they could signal us, this is the agency that's failing us to give us this much a bed, but we need them to do the work.
No,
So
yeah, absolutely.
But it would be great on a forthcoming basis to figure out how to use our platform to advocate for the addition of more beds.
Which I think we're gonna be doing in the statement of needs. I mean, we're not asking for specific, but budget priorities, but we're gonna be asking for that. I mean, and by the way, not like it's gonna come as a surprise to anybody. I mean, everybody knows that the village is having a hard time with all of that. The thing tricky about Paul's Place is that, it is what it is. It can't get any bigger.
Right.
It has a contract that fills its needs. It's not, it's not suffering from money. I don't know that it actually needs any specific support other than moral support, which we say, we really support their work.
They did say, and I actually should look back more closely at what they said they needed, but I remember they did say that they were open to kind of like donations of goods and things. So I wonder if we could provide them $10,000 for discretionary spending on toiletries or laundry detergent or things that would be useful to the residents and facilitate their service provision beyond what their contract provides.
For sundry supplies.
And going back to the people that are doing the work, I feel like separate from this budget thing, right? Obviously, this is very specific with the money thing, is that if we as a group can keep on connecting to figure out, I think like there's no pipeline for them to connect all the things that we need to know. For example, with the migrant situation, we felt that the federal government having budgets to fill hotels versus people that couldn't get into beds, there was a disconnect there of what was being prioritized. So we saw that through the people that actually are on the ground. So those social workers in mental health, I guess kind of ER situation, while they're not like an organization, I think that's the thing that we should tap in terms of support, because I think they can give us a better feel of what's needed and they tie in us with what needs to be done. Because those two agencies don't talk to each other, apparently.
Which agencies? Moya, you mean the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs?
Yeah, and the federal government. So when the buses were starting to come, the federal money came in and was able to, book hotels, and suddenly
I don't think it was federal money.
It was not?
I don't think so. I think it was city money.
It was city, that was the whole dock to go catastrophe.
Was it?
Yeah, I mean, the mayor said that, that our budget was being heavily burdened by the migrant crisis. And I think it's the city, it's DHS, and maybe Moya in this case that makes these contracts with
Yeah.
hotels, because hotels are the only safety, like they're the only release valve. You know, like shelters take years and years to build, but hotels, they can book really
Right,
quick.
but when the migrant situation came in, remember both agencies came to do presentations to us, and the comment was, how is it that the people have been waiting for beds for years and years, couldn't get prioritized? And suddenly, I think the conversation was that was a separate decision making, and somehow they were able to prioritize that. Again, I think that there's a lot of disconnect, and the social workers at the end of the day are doing those emergency, at night, like overdosing, figuring out how to get care and a bed. I can't even say housing because it's not housing.
Dan, I have a question. How are you,
Speak a little loud.
yeah, how are you trying to, orient this meeting and request around like separate categories? I'm just like, as a new committee member, we're kind of like bouncing around a lot of different subjects.
Yes, we are.
And so I'm just trying to get a
Let's
sense
talk
of, like,
about the outcome of the
capital
meeting.
requests, you have these other types of expense requests, we have non-city agencies, we have city agencies, so I'm just kind of like wondering how you're thinking about this.
Let's think about what the output of the meeting is, right? The outcome of the meeting is that we want to walk out of here with a sense of conceptually what our priorities are, like what's the biggest issues for CB2. And that's based on people that we've met. What specific priority budget requests we might have, which will come from what we're talking about and the requests that have been made by our service organizations. And then I think there's a second, actually 3 parts to the meeting. I would like to be able to come up with an official position on our support for these organizations. And the reason I say that is that most of the time, our output is a report, not a resolution. So there's no official position of CB2 on the work of Paul's Place or the work of the door. And I thought it might be useful to find a way without writing 50 resolutions to tick off the organizations that work in our district that we support. So that we could bring that to full board and have the full board agree on.
I think we've passed a pro Paul's Place resolution before, because I think I wrote it.
We did on what topic?
Just affirming our community's support for
Oh, okay.
their work and the presence of a safe haven, since there was such controversy about the potential addition of.
Okay, that makes sense.
But to your general plan.
I don't think we've done it for
Yeah, no,
God's
for,
Love. I don't think we've done
no,
it for the
you're
door. I don't
totally,
think we've done it for Greenwich House. I don't think we've done it for Red Door Place. And there's a little awkwardness in all this too, because we met with Red Door Place. We met at one point with St. Joe's Soup Kitchen. There's other organizations that we don't know that are, small not-for-profits. So it's a little awkward to single certain ones out, but I do feel that with ones that we talk to a lot, we should really have a position.
I wonder if it's something that we do thematically, what we were talking about before, of, as Ivy was saying, of, how we want to support those who are helping navigate people out of homelessness. And within that, we can call out the activities at multiple organizations, because a lot of these have programs that, the Bridge program or what the door is doing, or the Street Reach Out, where it's like they're all in that same.
They're all in the world of human services.
In the world of human services.
So maybe we could do one resolution and have it be kind of a catch-all resolution that says, we recognize and appreciate the contributions of various not-for-profit organizations in our district that work to help all these issues, and included among them are. And we tick them off, and if we feel like we support them, we say that we support them, and then we bring that to full board, and then we end up with an official position. Do you think that's a good approach?
Yeah, I think as long as we have like an end in that. So just thinking about, I would prefer if it was like, in the interest of helping people off the street in CB2, like be resolved that like we stand behind the work of these types of organizations, and intend to continue to support and elevate and raise the profile,
Kind of
whatever.
like smaller components
Perhaps
of
you
like
should-
outreach, shelter,
Uh-huh,
what you're.
Yeah,
yes.
perhaps you can even write a draft of it.
I could even write a draft of it.
The utility of it is, I think, for example, if the city were decide to end its contract with the door, I'm
Right.
making this up. You know, we would love to be able to say that CB2 officially supports the work of the door
Right,
and that we have had a position on this. And so I feel like that would be a good thing to be able to reference. It's kind of not that important really, but we've gone along all these years without it, but I do feel it would be a good thing to do. So maybe we'll work on that. And
Yeah.
does everyone feel comfortable doing a resolution like that?
and we can draft it, and we can even embed some like specific programmatic detail. in
Yeah.
it. Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. And we can talk, if everyone sort of is conceptually behind this, we can talk about whatever other organizations to put into it. I guess the question we would have, is there anyone that we don't support? Is there any organization's work we don't support?
Salvation Army.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Salvation Army.
Yeah.
So
I think-
That presentation just like, took me
Why
a
wasn't
week to
there
get
for that?
over with. That was rough. That was a rough
I
reaction.
don't think we need to explicitly
Yeah.
name organizations we don't support, but of the ones that have come before us and that we're aware of, I think I wouldn't necessarily include them on the list.
Okay, that's fine. I
I
mean,
think it's amazing that we all came into that very quick answer.
it's so funny because I missed that meeting, but I spoke to them before and I didn't feel the same way, but I wasn't at the meeting. But it doesn't matter because we don't have to list every single
Right,
thing
right.
that we've ever met with either, Yeah,
Yeah, I would just like to point out that 10 years ago, we supported the priority of CB2 was 75 Martin, and then they built it. So I know that we don't have any legal power, but sometimes people pay attention.
no, I agree. And I mean, I think, the community in general has been very loud about what's going on in Washington Square Park
Yes,
and around. And I do think it is bringing the city's attention to it.
yeah, and they pay some attention to what we say.
It was funny.
I like this idea that we say, this is really important, pay attention here.
So is there also a way for us to be more detailed in the concept of supporting pathways to have more money to hire more social workers that are on the ground? Because that was also a situation. They felt like everybody that was in those situations either they were overextended, they didn't have enough people working, and it's very hard work, obviously. And what I
would put
heard
that
was
very high.
basically
Yeah, sorry.
the system didn't allow more budgets to hire more people.
I would put that very high up.
So craft
in the
it that way because I think I think, okay,
I wouldn't put
because
that.
that's what I synthesized over the year, that those programs, that wasn't not in the pipeline because we were always lacking on funding. I mean, as a society, funding health, mental health, and obviously we have a trifold of need now, but we're still operating in an old system and an old budget. So if we can signal with that kind of voice, I think that'll be important. And I don't know how to write those things, and you know how to write those things brilliantly. Thank you.
I mean,
I
don't sell yourself short.
totally agree, and I think combining that point with Keith's point, like in terms of what we want to use our power and platform for on the front of mental health and addiction treatment of folks who are on the streets, like I do think the two core things we can push as district needs or in a resolution are increased funding for the social workers and caseworkers who are doing the actual outreach and service provision, not just cost of living adjustments, but drastically increasing those so that they can fill the positions with high quality people, and using our platform to say that we as a community want to see more safe haven stabilization beds in our community district. Because I think those are things where the first I think is just a matter of awareness and spotlighting. But I think the second also, there is a lot of pushback when those things come
Yes,
up
there is.
from people who live in the district. And so if we can use our leadership to suggest that that's something that we want to see the city prioritize, that would be very impactful.
And since, you know, I always don't like to take a position of asking to spend more money on something because that means you have to spend less money on something else, I don't think it actually matters because I think that identifying the need is what's important.
Yeah.
And identifying the problem that that stands in the way of fulfilling the need is what's important. And without having to ask for more money, we can easily say that a lack of quality salaries is what's causing the problem here.
And you might want to add language around like the classification of the role, so they don't just come back and say, well, it's union and blah. Like using words that will get to the fact that it's like a lot of these are unionized roles with very, very set increases based on a union contract. So you can say things like review the salary and classification of these roles to like hit at the duality there.
I think it's more about how they're classified in the city, like civil service system, but totally, yes, but
I'm a former civil servant.
yes.
I've had many different titles.
You're a former what?
I worked for the city for a long time.
You did, where did you work?
At the Department of Ed.
So, yeah, okay, great.
Which is in a
Tell us
shambles
the
now, although you have a new chancellor.
Oh, no, it's bad. It's been bad. Honestly, none of this is news to me. It's been bad a really long time. Yeah.
I was gonna say, we were talking about how we can have a strong voice last night at this precinct, city council, whatever, commission meeting. There were 1 million people there and everyone was mad and all the electeds were there and somebody said, but you know, it's really important that you all have come out because we now have the mayor's attention and we really have the mayor's attention. You're like, no, we don't. No, we don't. Nobody has the mayor's attention.
It's like, well, there's
right
no
now.
top brass of the NYPD and
Exactly. It's a little bit of a problem, but in theory.
Every agency is in even the ones where like the leaders have not left, like it is a very, very challenging time to be a civil servant right now. There is no real leadership across the board, but that's been true for the past like 2-3 years. Like this is not new.
Well, I was very disappointed to see that the head of DOHMH left because we talked to him when we were doing that mental illness, we did that big panel thing, town hall thing, and he was really smart and level-headed, and I don't think he's involved in any of the scandals. I think he might have just said like, I'm out of here.
No, right. So you're losing.
Not a good time. You're losing
You lose
talent.
good people
And the bad people. They're all going. Yeah, for different
So
reasons.
in our proposal or recommendation, right, it goes to obviously leadership. Is Jamari Williams in our list of where copies go to? Because in case they do take him out, he's the next in line.
Well, I mean, we will be writing, CB2 will be distributing it, submitting its statement of needs, which is a narrative. And who sees that? It goes into the official record. I don't know who sees
So
that.
it goes to the Department of City Planning's portal for it, and it then becomes public and anybody who wants to see it can see it. Oftentimes the audience you're pitching to is not so much the mayor's office and the Office of Management and Budget, although they'll see it too, but to the council members and to the borough president who have some measure of discretionary funding. Your or the board's list of priorities will become a roadmap for where, if they want to do what
They want to spend money, what's the point?
and if they want to spend money on mental health, you, like last year, you had IMT as one of your top priorities. I think it was one of the board's top priorities. So, while I'm interrupting, if I could also just say that it's a great conversation you're having. You might want to think about bifurcating it, and the resolution could bifurcate into 2 different things. So there is a narrative description of district needs.
Yes.
And that is where the board says, here's what we need for our district. And those needs, everything that's a budget priority should be a district need, but not necessarily the other way around. There may be things other than money that, like a change in regulations, a change in staffing protocols, whatever it might be. And that can be several paragraphs long. And if it needs to be, I can be cute and make digital documents out of it and then just put links in. But then there's going to be a separate section for what are, so, and remember that.
Specific money we're asking.
Right, we're asking for money for this and for that and for the other thing. And that needs to be a very succinct two sentence, get to the point, here's why we want it.
Yes.
So if you look in the digital drive, in the Google Drive that I gave you, there is a section of narratives from last year.
Right,
Not all of them were written by the committees.
right.
And some of them were extrapolated from the budget priorities, 'cause that's all we had to work with. So much better if you guys write it than me.
We will write it.
And you can,
We'll edit it. You'll cut it down.
well, I'll make sure that it fits somewhere.
Yeah.
But so that there's those two different kinds of statements. They're gonna go in the same document or the same portal, but you kind of want to have the focus be one and then the other. So one is kind of short and sweet and money, and the other is here's what's going on in our district and what we think is needed to redress some of the problems you're talking about. I hope that's.
No, that's huge,
That is
that's
so
hugely
helpful.
helpful, and to what we've been discussing, the question of salaries that don't, that fail to attract enough manpower goes in the statement of needs, whereas capital money to fix the facade of the door would be a priority, a budget request.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but
No,
remember that there are
it's not
two budgets that masquerade as one. There's a capital budget, $50,000 useful life of 5 years or more, and then there's an expense budget. And the way I like to summarize that is a capital expense is building a basketball court. An expense budget item would be running a program for youth on the basketball.
Okay, so like operating.
Yeah.
Very helpful. And we're talking about a third document, which is a resolution that finally, in at least one document, formally supports the organizations that help. Okay, this is really helpful. I think we have a lot to work with. And what I think I'll do is I'll write a draft of a statement of needs, our statement of needs contribution. And I guess we'll write a list that we can then decide upon for priority budget requests. And then maybe if you feel okay with it,
Yeah, I'll
maybe you can
draft the
start drafting a
Yeah, no
resolution,
problem.
which is great. And know also though that when we go into executive committee, we're pitching our ideas with everybody else's. So we might think that $750,000 for the doors facade is very important, but someone else will, that may not end up being the top priority for CB2 because we're mixing all of them together.
I just want to make a note on the facade. It may not be it's not cosmetic. You often have to do the facade work to keep your building open. It's not a choice.
No, it's not a choice,
It's not a choice.
and it's not glamorous, and it doesn't, it advances the program only in the sense that without the building, you can't have a program. You have to have a building, so.
I think it's so expensive because they're doing an asbestos abatement, which is very expensive.
It's
and time
expensive either
consuming.
way. Yeah. We just did our building.
So,
Just a
Yeah.
question on that. Given that like there has to be like it seems like there's a prioritization of all the expense requests that come in. How does the committee either historically or currently think about, well, where do we set our priorities in terms of what we want to push for the most versus maybe something that we think that has a very low chance of getting approved, so maybe we shouldn't push for it as much?
I would say overall that most things don't get approved.
Okay.
If you've seen the
At
responses,
the executive committee level or just like
No.
in the city?
no,
Okay.
listen, if you've looked at their responses, they will say this needs further study. We're doing this with existing funding. Please talk to your council member. I've never seen like, this is such a great idea. Wish we thought of it. Boy, we're gonna write a check tomorrow. Like, I've never seen that, right?
A few of them say, we will cover this with funding that we have.
Right.
So that's,
Right.
I take that as a win.
Yeah, no, but in other words,
But they mostly say no in creative ways.
yeah.
Yes, it is mostly no.
But in other words, it doesn't, I mean, we're not gaming this for a better response because the response is gonna be what the response they want it to be. So there's no gaming. You know what I mean? I understand your point. Like, maybe it would be better to ask for less money for something that we really want as opposed to more money. And then, but it doesn't matter. Right, Mark? I mean, it really doesn't matter. I mean, there's no gaming to be done.
And within the agency itself, that's generally speaking the case, yes.
It's not like they're gonna say, well,
When you say
gee,
the agency, you mean like the agency that we're directing the request to, like
Correct.
out of your budget, we want you to do this.
Right, so either
Yeah.
give more money to the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene so that they can do X. And you're right, that theoretically, we're supposed to say, and take the money from parks, which no one's gonna say. And we don't know the intricacies of the budget well enough to make that informed choice anyway, so that's not a reasonable thing. But I was trying to draw the distinction between discretionary budgets, and most of the time that can be council funding, right? The council gets a chunk of the budget, turns out to be a relatively small one, that they can direct to fill in for things that the mayor's executive budget doesn't cover.
And a lot of organizations rely on those small discretionary.
And then there's the discretionary things with the council member and the
Borough
borough president. Borough president tends to be capital money. And actually, council members tends to be capital money too, usually a little bit of expense money as well.
Okay,
And just to follow up on that, once we submit the budget request and it goes through executive committee and it goes through the full board and we approve it and it goes to the city, what is the process then there for like the mayor and agencies to respond? And then do we just kind of like take that at face value, or do we then go back?
Okay, so may I take that?
yes, I just want to say one thing. To me, the value of all of this has always seemed, it's just a statement of position. It's a political document, not actually a game plan, but
And with
I
some,
defer to you.
with some things, if the council member is looking to spend money on a park, they'll look to our list and say, well, that's the park we'll focus on instead of this park over here. So there is some practical import to that. To answer your question, the next step after this is that they take this portal and the list of our priorities. Basically, it's the budget priorities, not the narrative description. That becomes an advocacy document of its own. You're absolutely right. They take that list and OMB splits it up to, well, and we identify which agency we think this goes to. So
parks,
Department of-
DOHMH,
right,
DOE.
could be Department of Homeless Services, it could be, okay. So they take the ones that are directed to homeless services and they send all of ours that relate to homeless services to DHS, okay. They then look at them and then they say yes, no, over my dead body, whatever it is that they say. And then they respond back to OMB, who then responds back to us with what's in the Google Drive. And so, and actually it looks like a spreadsheet, not as good as yours, but a spreadsheet that says, here's what we wanted, here's what the agency said. And then in February, we're supposed to write a letter that responds to the response.
Got it.
As if that's going to change anything.
Right.
But the purpose of that is that the agency in December, this is why you're doing this now, is that the deadline is October 31st, so basically Thanksgiving. And then the agency gets it and they spend December assimilating all these things. And then they make their report to OMB and that becomes
Their priority.
right, that becomes part of what is then folded into the mayor's preliminary budget, which is supposed to be in January, but it often is late. I'm going to bet you a good beer is going to be late this year. Right, and then that's why in February you get the register back that says yes, no, maybe. And then from there, it goes on to the mayor's executive budget, and then the real fun happens. And remember that there are two tranches of city council hearings, one after the preliminary budget, one after the executive budget, and then it culminates in the adopted budget, which is of course a political struggle. And that has to happen by June 30th, or else I don't get paid.
So in short, it starts out as a river and it ends up as a trickle, but it is our job to do this every year. This is what we do. This is the output of the community boards.
Yeah, and I think, at different times in history, I think for years and years, a lot of things just look like this long process, but at times, different things that are very impactful from this city can happen. And this kind of recommendation becomes a voice and people do activate. It may either it can fund it, it could seed fund something, and leadership actually hears that and could be very different. For example, HIV and AIDS. Communities showed up and made recommendations for, let's say, God's love. It seeded them attention that they could take that to get more funding. And that happened really quickly. So I think it's really important to take a snapshot that over time, there's a lot of things that don't need funding, or it looks like this very long process, but immigration could be this next thing for us because it is a lot of people. It is very impactful. So we don't know, and there's no gaming, but that voice of what it needs to represent as investment is not just money, because you can take that recommendation and get better funding. Because they, like Goslov, they used to say, you know, community board is where a lot of residents have died. This is what we're hearing before, next 3 years, people heard it and they were able to fund what it is. So that's an inspiration to my history.
Yeah, I hope I don't come across as cynical. I'm a little jocular, but I'm not actually cynical.
No, like when Mark talked about, because I think like educational funding looks like that. It's really slow because over time it doesn't, that the urgency as people are mobile in ages looks different. But if you have an impact, let's say with HIV, I mean, for those who don't know me, I've been positive for 33 years. I saw that happen. What community could do, it inspired the need and was very clearly heard, and everybody invested in that change. And now we have God's love, who no longer just does HIV, but it helps all of us, right? So it's good to be reminded that leadership does listen to, things that are really dire.
Thank you, Ivy. That's very encouraging. I also just want to say there Carter Booth, who's on our board, not on our committee, but on our board, is an attendee, and so is Sophia Ram Sharitar is the other attendee at this meeting. If anyone wants to say something, please raise your hand. Because it's an open discussion. There's very few of us here.
Do we feel, to Arturo's earlier point about thinking kind of in a framework of moving towards outcomes, do we want to talk more specifically about potential capital or expense requests from folks that we've mentioned? Or
do you mean you want to prioritize them, or do you want to put them in order of priority, or do you want to?
I mean, I guess that begs the question about, are we gonna include all of them and it's just a function of prioritizing?
So let's go. We haven't had, so
and
go
also
over the list.
Yeah, so I guess like the ones that have been requested of us, are we just saying yes and we're prioritizing them? The ones that haven't been requested for the three other entities, do we want to like put a dollar amount and a name to something?
I don't think we need to put a dollar amount, because the budget priority requests are not dollar amounts.
Okay, great.
They're just items,
Great.
money to rebuild the facade.
Great. Oh, so yeah, I guess
Right,
it's a
Mark?
good
We don't put dollar amounts on the,
If you have dollar amounts, it's fine to put them in,
but
but
we
they
don't
can be
have to.
considered without them. And then the other thing I'll just mention is that for each subject, the board as a whole votes on 3 top priorities. They can be either capital or expense, but then each subject matter area, which is roughly equivalent to your committees.
Right.
Not exactly.
Prioritizes.
Yes, there's one. You're supposed to identify one top priority.
Okay.
So it'd be good for around the table to
Let's
make sure
do
that
that.
you're on the same page for that.
Okay, so of these requests, do you guys see one top priority? So should I go over the list again?
Yeah.
I just want to point out, there's one other part of this meeting where I want to talk about the future, and our scope. Okay, so we have $25,000 general expense money for GL, for God's love. That's expenses. The door, money for holistic care, money for food services, and these are both expenses, and then capital money for construction, right? Greenwich House, these are all, so 2 of them, expenses, community engagement manager, expanded enrichment services, and then capital for the building. Red Door Place, bridging the gap, that would be an expense request, right? Manhattan outreach, I mean, it would definitely be an expense. Paul's Place would be an expense. So on this list, we have 2 capital requests, and we have a bunch of expense requests, as I see it.
What was the second capital one?
The Greenwich House building.
The Greenwich House building and the door building. And both of them are funding this with their own money, but what they would love is to have money so that not so much of their budget has to go to this.
Before prioritizing or discussing, I
Yeah.
guess like, I think for Paul's Place, it's clear, like looking back, they literally say they, you know, encourage donations of toiletries and things. So like, I think money for those things is pretty clear. I'm not quite as clear for the outreach consortium, whether we can have I don't think we can have a request for money for their staff. So is there anything we actually could request for them is question one. And question two is for Red Door Place, do we want to have just one request for staff for bridging the gap, or do we want to also have a request related to the food pantry, you know, the more specifically around food? I think they also said they took donations of.
Yeah, Red Door Place doesn't have a city contract, which is different than, I think all of these
Yeah,
other
yeah.
organizations. So I think that with the Manhattan Outreach Consortium, I sort of feel like their budget is what their budget is. Like the city did increase after COVID. It did increase the budget for MOC. And they still have a lot of problems, but I kind of feel like we could express it. We're gonna definitely express it in the statement.
Right, I'm just wondering if
No,
there
I
is
know, I
an
just discussed it.
yeah, like, do they need a new van? You know, like,
Could they benefit from like similar discretionary, like, to bring things with them? When they
I
go
don't
outreach?
know.
Like,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think so, but I don't know.
I like the idea of if we can, it sounds like we want to keep these separate by organization, right?
By agency,
By
Yeah,
by organization.
by
by
organization.
organization.
yeah.
And so like the idea of having the capital requests separate and the expense requests consolidated by nonprofit group as much as possible seems just like a more succinct request.
I think we.
Certainly capital and expense,
Yeah.
set separately.
But I think each expense request would be
A separate line.
item that we would say we're requesting.
Okay.
But we don't have to group them, even if the door has two things,
Yeah.
we can have two different items.
So we have two capital requests here. Money to fix the door and money to fix GH.
Yeah.
I mean, do you prioritize one over the other? I would.
We have to, right? Because it's how they end up being ranked anyways.
Do we?
Well, we want to make one priority capital request and one priority expense request, right?
No, you might have separate ones for different, if it's a different building, for example, they probably would be different ones, and yes, I'm obliged to put them in some order, so.
All right, so I would put
Get
the,
order from you. But
I would
Carter's
put the
in your
door, the
chat.
door seems to have a huge amount of need for money, so I would put the doors capital campaign first. It's just, I mean, I don't know, making it up. What do you think?
I feel like we're not gonna propose either of these onto the top three for all of CB2.
No. But we also have to do it for our committee, so.
Do we, wait, are we sure about that? I thought that we just had our list of, sorry to go back on process. I thought that we had our list of capital and unprioritized list of capital and operating expenses.
They're
And
always
then
priority.
we just share the ones that we want to be brought forward into the top line overall community board.
We prioritize our list and then our prioritized list goes with CB2's other committee prioritized lists. And then the
Fair.
executive committee prioritizes among all of those priorities.
Okay,
Right.
Because if you look at the district needs statement, there will be numbers next to every single one that made the final. Now, not every one that comes out of committee is adopted by the full executive committee, but yes, they were all.
But for example, if
Got
we
it.
say we have two capital requests that we know of, right? One for the door, one for Greenwich House. If we say we prioritize first the door and then Greenwich House, when we go into the executive committee, they say we don't prioritize any of that. We'll put it on the list way down,
Right,
but it's
right,
not a priority
right,
for
right,
CB2,
right,
which
right.
is fine. We've
Okay.
done our part.
Yeah.
So of the two capital requests, does anyone have
the door.
Okay, so
Sure.
number one, the door.
Also, in the future, it's gonna be really, really nice to get numbers for these, just because like,
Well,
hey,
some
we
of us have
want
given
some money
numbers.
for these things, like
Yeah.
that doesn't really, I think, make a strong case to anybody.
Right, well, the
haven't
door
worked
gave
much
us
with nonprofits, have you?
750,000. At the door gave us a number of 750,000, which I would be reluctant to put in there. 'Cause I feel like,
That's too much money.
it's a lot of money.
So me too. But again, talking about the inspirational stuff, I mean, look at God's Love spent what, I don't know, 17 million, 25
Yeah.
million, and
They do
that
it
came
all.
along, but that came along after, along the way, we always upgraded before turning the building.
They do it all with private money. They do it all with private money. They don't
But
have time.
over time, the work spoke for itself and was able to just do that.
Yeah.
And I was, but there,
I mean,
we did it.
Suzanne, I don't think we need to fiddle with the numbers so much because we
Right.
know already that we're not gonna fight like in
Yeah, I'm not worried about
the
the
full
number.
committee meeting to get these at the top of the list
no,
anyway.
I don't think that they will. However, let's talk about our expense requests. General money for God's Love, for holistic care for the door, for food service for the door. I would put holistic care for the door high up. Paul's Place discretionary spending, that's very little money. I would put that low down. I'm just talking out of my head, so you guys jump in.
I like Red Door Place. I was here for that.
Yeah, the bridging the gap.
The bridging the gap. Okay, let's put that.
I feel like the food pantries didn't actually talk about their need to have so much more food.
No, they get it from the food bank.
So
That's not the issue for them.
I'm with you. I feel like my top two, and I'm
Yeah,
pretty
go ahead.
impartial on the order, is the holistic care at the door and or the bridging the gap at Red Door.
How do you guys feel about
I'm
that?
not sure which one.
I agree because I feel like they're trying to make more upstream interventions for folks to minimize the later needs for the specific services.
Okay, good.
So, and I think I would prioritize bridging the gap because I think they are more resource deficient.
Okay. And that would go to the department. What department would that go to? I guess health and mental services.
Mental health,
What? Yeah, I guess.
mental health, maybe?
HMH?
For DSS, is that Department of-
Department of Defense.
All right, well, let's see, bridging the gap. Okay. And then the door holistic care, they'll tell us what agency. Okay, so so for Greenwich House, they would like expenses for enrichment expenses and community engagement manager. I think that what that is that they want to up their membership. I'm not putting Manhattan Outreach on this list. Let's put Paul's Place down there.
Sorry, can you just remind me why Manhattan Outreach is not a?
Because there's nothing that we actually can request for them.
But we're gonna put it in the district need, we're gonna put it in the district needs statement.
Just because the thing that they need is more money for staff, but that's not something that can be allocated in a discretionary way through these requests. So it's something we can advocate for through the resolution, but they don't have a specific ask that
Yeah,
comports with these kinds of requests.
and
So
in
right.
fact, yeah, their problem is that they have vacancies on their staff. It's not that they.
All right.
Right, I think we'll put that in the, right, so
Yeah.
the district needs statement, not in the
Absolutely.
because we
Not
already
in
did the
the
resolution.
resolution, in the
Yeah, sorry,
district.
the district needs.
Yeah. So left on our list, so we've talked about Paul's Place, we've talked about MOC, Manhattan Outreach, we've talked about bridging the gap. We've talked about the doors holistic care services. What's left here are stuff that GH wants, Greenwich House wants, and stuff that the door would like. So food services for the door and a community engagement manager and expanded enrichment services for Greenwich House.
And what about the tuition offset at the,
You know, that's a good question. Oh, yeah, I guess we should put that in there.
for the door?
Right.
And what about the access to the arts thing for Greenwich House?
I don't even know how to interpret that.
Was that the enrichment one or is that separate?
No, it's
Separate.
between engagement manager and enrichment. Right, it's grants and public funding that helps us bring members from our adult centers into our art spaces.
Well, we could ask that of the Arts Commission. Is that what's the city agency for the arts? Sure, why not?
Is this just like a bus to take people to, I mean, that wasn't the district.
Yeah, when he
Last year,
to bring people.
Was.
right? It was.
Yeah,
I'm
that,
not kidding.
they
for
did that.
because, yeah, a bus.
I think that in this case, it's talking about just having access to more arts things, like maybe it would be a grant that allows.
I think it's a grant. Oh, he says we've been piloting the structure and approach for such linkages, which I assume means like staff time to
Sounds
like
like a bus.
coordinate.
It sounds like a bus.
Literally.
Sounds like a bus to take them to the Whitney.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, it doesn't sound like something we want to prioritize.
Yeah, that does not seem.
What if-
It sounds underbaked. I mean,
What if we said for the door, because they need a lot, they could, it certainly sounds like we're not.
I mean,
really-
this is Greenwich House.
Say that again?
This is
This is
Greenwich
Greenwich
House.
House.
I'm sorry, I meant.
Yeah,
Greenwich
yeah,
House.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, I meant
No,
Greenwich
no,
House.
I'll-
Greenwich House seems to have, it's not. I kind of feel like we could just ask for money to expand their services
Yeah.
I think that's.
and expand their reach.
Especially since
Yeah,
there
yeah,
aren't
yeah.
dollar amounts
Right, and
attached,
they
it's like a
can-
big ask.
They
So,
can use
I
their
agree.
They can make
judgment.
the
Yeah.
bus.
So yeah, enrichment, opportunity, RSP engagement.
Okay.
They can-
And membership, because they should.
Yeah, the community engagement idea sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of these terms are a little hard to communicate, but I think, I mean, and I could be wrong, but I'm thinking like if we just said, increased funding to expand membership and increase enrichment services.
Yeah.
I think I would tell, that's a call for discretionary funding from a city council person, if you ask me. So I think that we've done, actually, we have the door and the Greenwich House as our two capital requests in that order. For expenses, our top priority is bridging the gap. And then holistic care at the door. The MSW program at the door and expanded services and membership at Greenwich House. And then Paul's Place.
There was a third request from the door, though.
And what about God's
For
Love?
food services, right?
And also the God's Love We Deliver check money, are we
Oh,
sliding that
yeah.
in somewhere?
Yeah, we should.
I think it feels similar to the Doors food service.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe those.
Can we,
Like,
can we actually put all the food services together?
No.
I think we should prioritize God's Love because they're more.
Where would we put, I would
For
put that
competency.
before the discretionary.
Yeah,
I want the
Paul's
Paul's
Place.
Place discretionary way up, but
Let's put them after Paul's Place, because first of all, the truth is that God's love does most of it on its own.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think if most of our stuff is around more like the homeless outreach, et cetera, those other organizations are more, not necessarily Greenwich House, but there, others are more tied, so the food.
All right, so
Yeah,
Greenwich House.
and also
for
the food
general
service,
expenses.
not to be particularly blunt about this, but a lot of them serve many people who aren't CB2 residents.
Well, that is a whole different issue because God's love primarily serves outside CB2 and so does the door.
I think, I would say most of them do.
Yeah.
Same with Red Door, like most of those people,
Yeah.
I see them getting off the train and going to the food pantry, which is totally fine.
Yeah, no,
It makes
I mean,
sense.
what I always say is like service organizations that serve to and from. CB2.
Right, right.
I mean, I think we value them even though they're
Mhm.
our district isn't.
If I could make just one statement on behalf of prioritizing the Pulse Place stuff higher.
Yes.
I think, for stuff like the Greenwich House, additional money for programming stuff, they have their core stuff covered. They are thinking about piloting, innovating, expanding. Pulse Place, they need donations of toiletries because they don't have enough toiletries to have these people
Okay.
have toiletries.
I'll
So
give it to you. Where do you want
I wanted a number, or maybe just below bridging the gap in the holistic
Really?
care.
it? All right.
Yeah,
Oh, but-
I agree with that, by the way.
I would have
Like in,
it
above the
above
social
holistic
work
care.
program.
All right.
I think below the upstream interventions, but above the service prevention.
Okay, so maybe go one down.
So.
After holistic care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that.
Okay.
Also, it feels nice to kind of prioritize the diversity of organizations to kind of
Okay.
So
show that we care about.
We
more than
care.
just-
We do. We care.
Can we reach out to Paul's Place and ask them what they think that would look like in a number form?
I don't think it matters. I think what it's gonna.
I know.
I put $10,000.
I know it doesn't matter, but I don't even know.
That's a good cause for participatory budget, by the way.
I don't even know what the ballpark is
Yeah.
on that. I mean, I could do a back of the
Yeah,
envelope.
that would really
but-
be, they should apply for participatory budget
They should.
because,
I mean, I give often to little fundraising campaigns for these safe havens and shelters where they're just buying a lot of shampoo stuff. And I think that there's quite a bit of need, and so 10,000 feels like definitely not too much.
But
Okay,
that information you can find in their annual report, right? And as a,
well, if they're relying on donations, you won't find it, but
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. Let's just put it in
Yeah.
wherever you want it.
great, thank you. Thanks
So
for
it's gonna end up
you.
filtered, yeah. Okay.
They won't have.
Now, I would like, if we are done with all of this, right, we're gonna write a resolution, we're gonna draft statement of needs, we have a list of budget priority requests, we're gonna share all that before we share it with you. Two things I need to discuss. One is two housekeeping matters and then like a scoping matter. So the housekeeping matter, our next meeting in theory is October 31st, which is, as some of you may know, Halloween. I plan for that meeting, if it works out. First of all, an in-person meeting is not feasible. But Mark and I were talking, I said, could it be an online meeting? Because if it's just an informational session and we're not really doing a resolution, maybe we could just do that. And there's two possibilities that interest me for that. One is Planned Parenthood, which was a thing that Janine was interested in. They seem to have some budgeting pressures that are causing them to no longer do late-term abortions that require heavy sedation. So they may come in. And I'm also trying to discuss with the DA's office. I'm trying to get an appointment with the DA's office. The DA's office has an interagency initiative that tries to put together NYPD, DHS, DSNY, blah, 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 to treat all of this outreach in places where there are a lot of homeless people and a lot of substance use. Now, my understanding is that they're doing that in Midtown and Harlem, but there seems to be another initiative similar that was mentioned last night that is actually going on in Washington Square Park. So for October, we could maybe have this woman from the DA come and tell us what this program is in Midtown and Harlem, or the one in Washington Square Park. And if I can get them in, we could do it as an information center session and put it out as a report. But the first question is, are you all gonna be busy on Halloween? At 6:30?
What day is it, like a Tuesday or something?
It's a Thursday.
Thursday.
Stay indoors. I live like on the route of the parade. So
Oh.
I lock down at about 4 p.m.
By choice or because?
Fascinated with
By
presidential
choice. I do not leave.
election.
Yeah?
Just, I probably won't.
Well, I can't Halloween.
But if it's
Yeah,
worth it,
no.
maybe I could join.
Like, that's gonna be top priority. Well, the choice is really October 30th, which is not gonna help with that at all.
Yeah.
So if you guys are okay doing a Zoom meeting, I would do a Zoom meeting and just get it done. Because the truth is that November and December, we're screwed every year because it's Thanksgiving and Christmas. So we will probably have a 2-month gap after that. So, and as Mark pointed out, if we wanted to have a resolution,
We won't meet in
we won't meet.
November and
virtually.
December.
No, unless there's something urgent, which sort of.
so the option is October 30th on Zoom, right?
October 31st on Zoom, or if we want October 30th, we might be able to get October 30th in person. You're never moving,
I love the idea.
I like to see.
right?
Of which one?
Well, I mean,
Which
I
idea?
do either one, right? And you're gonna be remote can you be remote for October 31st or you can't be?
I want to play October 31st.
You what?
That's Halloween, right?
Yeah, it's Halloween. That's what I was asking. Is are people busy?
Exactly. I'm playing on October 31st.
Okay, so 31st is not, okay. So we'll try for the 30th.
I have a conflict on the.
And you have a conflict on the 30th. Okay. For a different board, which happens.
Yeah, I prefer the 31st, by the way.
Okay. Okay. We're gonna aim for the 31st. Both the 31st and the 30th mean no rider. Because it's.
I mean, it's a
I know, it's a.
possibility. I can't be it either. I'll be in the Pacific
Showing
for
up.
work.
I want to go there.
All right, well, Okay, to be continued. It's gonna be one of those days. We'll figure that out. That was one housekeeping thing. The other housekeeping
Wait,
thing.
oh,
yes.
sorry. Did we need to technically vote on this resolution that I'm going to write?
As a matter of fact, we do. I'm so unused to passing resolutions that we don't take votes on. So,
But
And it has to be
are we in business
advertised
session
in
now?
public.
are we what?
Are we in business session? I mean, we have to vote.
Oh,
I guess are we in business session?
No, because it's
God,
not.
we never do that either.
Later, so.
Never do that either.
Not today.
Yeah.
Let's wait to go into business session. Can
Okay.
someone please remind me before we leave that we have to take the vote?
Okay.
Okay. The other housekeeping thing is that at this famous executive committee meeting where we advocate for what we want, I'm gonna be out of the country. In Europe.
Not in the
So,
Pacific.
Not in the Pacific, such the North Sea, but, so I need someone to replace me.
And what day is that?
That is October
22nd.
22nd, executive committee. Now, we also have other members, well, who are not in the room, Ritu and Janet. And if no one shows, we can still just wing it. I mean, it's not the end of the world.
No, but Ryder is gonna go.
No, well, I was gonna say, Ritu as vice chair really should be the person who's going.
Ritu should go, but we'll see if she's
But she
available.
wasn't here.
And she wasn't here tonight.
But don't you already go to exec?
I do go to executive committee,
Oh.
but
What do
I'm
you
not
do?
sure. Yeah, and I'd be happy to do it, but I feel that there may be others in the group who
I
can deliver the point.
In business,
In ways that
does
are
everyone feel
better than
comfortable with
mine.
Emma representing the interests of the
Yes.
Student Services Committee?
Yes.
Okay.
I think also because the only thing that we're really pushing on is like the top two things in
Totally.
the ops.
Right.
The operational expenses and everything else is.
Yeah.
Just in the list.
And I think the other thing to advocate for, I mean, and I don't think it's gonna be a hard sell, is that the issues of homelessness, mental health, and substance use are the top priority for CB2.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think that's gonna be a hard sell.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Sorry, I
No, I'm happy to do it, but I'm also happy for others.
have to charge my computer. Okay, so the last thing on our personal agenda. Yes.
Just on the topic of like planning, I know I sent that email when I was first appointed on like, based on my assessment of the historic meetings that I've been to, we had a lot of meetings that are like organization and nonprofit oriented. I'd like to meet a little bit more with like the agencies. Yeah, I'd like to see them kind of come here and the way they come to like the street activities and to parks and kind of like, this is what we're working on, this is what we're doing, this is how we work together, not just like inter-agency, but also with
Okay,
nonprofits, because I think like to your point earlier, like there's sometimes there's this gap, and I wanna try to understand like how we can help them bridge that gap, or if they're like looking somewhere where they should like, yeah, just bridging that gap essentially.
well, that's an excellent segue to this part of our meeting where I think we need to discuss what goes on for the year. I'm frustrated because I think that the top issue for everybody in the village right now is this terrible problem of mental health and substance use and low-level crime and homelessness, and that should be our committee, and I don't know how we get at that.
I have some people I want to bring in or ideas.
All right, let's talk, first of all, and yeah, okay, and then I'll talk, let's talk about who we'd like to have in.
Okay, so I think to the point we were talking about earlier, which is that having low threshold beds, private dignified options connecting people to mental health and addiction services would be a boon to address street homelessness and the vulnerability we're seeing. But we generally just hear from the people who are like proposing to operate that rather than folks who are kind of like advocating at a broader level for the expansion of those. So I think like Open Hearts, which is the organization that kind of pushes back against community opposition to these projects and pushes for city legislation or advocates for city legislation on behalf of unhoused New Yorkers would be good to bring in. Maybe also someone from like the Coalition for the Homeless, which has really good data about specifically comparing like long-term stay rates in safe haven shelters versus congregate shelters, and they can speak to their increased efficacy and kind of the landscape, the number of congregate shelter beds versus safe haven beds, kind of big picture, so that we could then presumably write a resolution about those things and bring them to the board and community's attention.
I like that idea, but I would want to do it mix it with Arturo's idea. That
Yeah.
If we have the Coalition for the Homeless, which is an advocacy group, that we have someone from the city that can give us a reality check. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or a counterpoint date.
Or a counterpoint, yeah.
Yeah,
Another-
perspective, totally.
So maybe what we could do is get someone from DHS in a city that's in the shambles. Open Hearts is a very small initiative.
Yeah.
So is everyone familiar with Open Hearts? They were a very small organization that started when the Lucerne during COVID, the Lucerne became a shelter uptown and up the Upper West Side, and there was a lot of opposition to it. So this one woman started this organization to take the opposite tack and to reach out and to try to create bridges between this population. They were vocal when we were having conversations about the Grand Street shelter that never happened. But I don't know how active, I mean, I thought it was like 2 people.
It is small, but I know both of the people, like, they definitely could come.
Open Hearts.
Corinne or something.
Corinne isn't really involved day to day. She's a professor working with my brother. They're both economists at work, and they did PhDs at Harvard together. Sarah is leading the charge, but also, they have a couple of other people who work part-time or, Sarah definitely would come, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Are there any organizations or any list of organizations that are social workers in advocacy that we can invite?
Yeah, I don't like to only have advocacy people in because we end
No,
up.
but people that are working on, like, for example,
But I think
I
they're
also think
having
about,
an advocacy organization with an expert that also has an understanding about what it takes to create the shelters and what they
right.
cost.
So that would be for me in my community, basically, that people have done it successfully. Obviously, Housing Works and Vocal. So they are, how do you say, trailblazers, because not only they've done the work successfully, and they also do policy shaping, like Vocal, which is housing HIV positive homeless teens, has an advocacy that does work in Albany all the time. So that's a good reality check, because it goes beyond like putting fires, which they do every day, but yet they have an arm that has a pathway in shaping policy. So they would be good to invite. And I also would like to know if Housing Works, with all the money they're getting with cannabis, if they're gonna maybe incubate ideas of what social work will look like, because they are incubating. They incubated 2 businesses with their cannabis initiative, which was amazing, and I really love that, because once they got their license, they got the first Black woman dispensary legalized in Brooklyn, and the other one was a queer organization. But the incubation included pathways of getting the license, but finance and legal help. So I would like them, it would be interesting to have the conversation if they will ever have a plan to do that for social workers.
That sounds interesting. Never mind that Charles King said, I will never try to start a shelter again after the Grand Street experience. But I certainly, 1 or 2 of those groups with someone from the city would be great.
And my second thing, wish list thing, and it's on here, is to talk about Be Heard. There just was a council hearing about it and reporting about how, the number of calls they responded to doubled, but it's still such a small number in terms of the big picture number of calls that come in through 111 and 911 about people who are having issues on the streets. And so hearing more about, like, what are the successes, what are the challenges, what are other models,
and is it effective? I mean, this is the question about IMTs, which we really advocated for, and we heard from a lot of people about that. And then there was this piece in the Times that says we really don't know if they work or not. And that merits, you raised that last year, that merits more consideration, right?
that could be one meeting about, like, the efficacy like
Well, maybe,
challenges and successes of non-police responses to mental health and homelessness and addiction issues on the street.
the other thing that was mentioned, at full board, this guy from the DA's office came and said that they have this, these navigators, court navigators, which is another approach to trying to stem people from the criminal justice system into treatment. So that's another possibility, I think.
Just on the Be Heard thing, so that, it sounds like that's ran by the mayor's office of community mental health.
Yeah, it's HMA.
So they would be the ones that would come and present?
Yeah, and it's tricky because obviously their commissioner has resigned, but presumably we could get someone down the ladder to come and talk to us about the experiences of, you know, what evidence they have. Have they done a program evaluation? Are they, you know, what are they seeing? I mean, one of the, Be Heard hasn't been assigned to our district.
Yeah, I guess that was my follow-up
He asked
question, is like, how does that agency work in our district? Like, what touch points do they have with our district? What kind of data do they have that they can share about what they're providing to either people who are here or, you know, just their interaction with the district is what I'd like to know.
Well,
I
we can,
know, our DOH mentioned, I don't know what their touch points are.
No, I think it's more like, like Eric Bach sent the letter to the mayor being like, we want this in our district. It's
Yeah.
more like,
what is it?
what could it provide? to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
district?
100%.
Yeah.
But starting that conversation.
Yeah, I agree. And I like your idea of bringing the agencies in. On a different, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, could I just rewind a second to what Ivy said? Because I actually think because there are now many dispensaries in the district, and I also sit on the cannabis committee, that are backed by these nonprofits that focus on human services. I think it would actually be really cool to have a joint meeting between cannabis and human services where we do bring in Housing Works and we say, hey, you've been operating this dispensary for 2.5 years now, like printing money. What are you doing with that? Like, where is that going? It was all meant to be reinvested between them and the Doe Fund, and a couple other nonprofits. Like, theoretically, they're supposed to be using that for social impact reasons.
Well, theoretically, I mean, they could probably just put that into their budget, though. Everything they do is social impact, right?
Yeah, but
Housing Works.
I mean, like, have we seen a huge?
But it was like 27 million the first quarter.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, so like, where's that money? I think it's a valid question for us to ask, like, where is that money going and
Okay.
what are you doing with it?
That sounds good. On a different note, I would really like to get someone from Bellevue in here, because MSBI is going to close. I mean, you know, they're fighting it. And it hasn't closed yet, but it's in a death spiral anyway. So
You shared the October 22nd hearing about the clinics closing. I you know, if a whole bunch of us a few of us can attend, I think it's going to be informative.
what October 22nd? I'm not.
It's in the some hearing for the closing of clinics.
Maybe I'm not familiar. I have no idea.
Sent us
It's not the email that you sent.
I sent it? Really? Oh, I met her too.
Somebody's been on vacation.
Out of sight, out of mind. Anyway, so
Happy anniversary.
my understanding is that that one of the parts of the deal of well, there's a couple of things going on with MSBI closing. One is that there's hope of reaching a settlement, and that settlement would involve getting something out of MSBI. And I have not followed the conversations where it's discussed what that request would be, like whether it's a standalone emergency room or whatever it is. But my understanding is that and Ritu knows more about this, but she also sits on the community advisory board for Bellevue, is that MSBI would give money to Health and Human Services, Health Hospitals, was it Health and Hospitals? The one that, Health and Hospitals, which runs Bellevue, what's Health and Hospitals? HHS, Health and Hospitals Corporation. HHC, thank you. That MSBI will give money to HHC to expand Bellevue's services, because there's going to be a really bad scene when that emergency room is gone. So I would really love to get Bellevue. I don't know if we can do that, but I'm going to ask. Look, what is a post MSBI look like? And it's gonna be tricky because they probably won't want to say too much because it's a colleague organization, but I think it'd be fair at some point to ask them, what is the plan?
Would it be them or would it be the health and hospitals? Because wouldn't health and hospitals be driving that settlement?
I don't know, because I think, I don't know how they're set up, whether
Mm.
Bellevue is able to negotiate on it. Okay,
And then
yeah,
one more that I'd like to speak to is the
Yeah.
Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. I'd like to
Yes.
get just like an update on, hey, this is where we were, this is where we are now. And I think, I
okay,
don't know how much it intersects on like the housing and hotels front with our district, but we've heard from various providers that they support this community. So I'd like to just understand that if there's something that we should be advocating even more so on their behalf to support this situation.
well, I also think it would be interesting just to know where, where it stands and what kind of pressures the city is experiencing from it. We had MOI at Moya Inn. I think most of you were here a couple of years ago. We first talked about the migrant crisis because there is a hotel on Grant Street, the one that was going to become a shelter, that is now being used as a shelter for migrant families. And that's the only location in CB2, my understanding, that is housing migrants, but that gives us a justification for asking what the situation is with that. So, okay.
And sorry, I know I said I was done, but in terms, I thought of one more thing with the nexus to the vulnerability on the streets, which is public toilets. I know
I would piggyback on that.
because there are bills in front of the council right now
I
that
know.
are not gonna be enough, but
There's also money. No, there's money. There's money
There
that's
is
been
money.
spent and it's sitting there. I know this from CB5.
Mhm.
I had a meeting with somebody as a result of CB5 has been dealing with this for a long time. I talked to the toilet people. And
So
the toilet people, and one of the the hardest parts of
Is there a
that
toilet
is-
czar?
What?
Is there a
The toilet
toilet
czar,
czar?
exactly. One of the hardest parts is citing them.
right.
Yeah.
So the two bills, one would require the generation of a siting plan to have one per zip code and just coming up with an idea of where they might go. So it'd still be years before they're
So
there.
they could go.
But the other one is a bill that would require public buildings to provide public bathroom access if practicable.
Like subways and,
Or government buildings,
Mm.
if there's.
okay. Can you imagine? Yeah.
I definitely think we should
So
talk
a
about
hot
that.
meeting when we have public toilets. Because people will free, which is fine.
I think people relatedly, I am just interested in infrastructurally bringing supports to places where folks are in need. Right, I think I've mentioned this before, but mobile showers,
Oh,
mobile health units. I know that these things operate. I don't see any presence of them in our particular neighborhood, and I don't know enough about this, and I can look into it more before I
They
send a
sometimes have it at
package.
the Salvation Army. They do have those on Fridays. There's a
Yes.
whole fiesta every Friday.
Interesting. Okay,
And
so
they
I didn't
have
know that.
mobile units and stuff of different kinds, and they rotate what they
Yes.
are.
Yes, okay.
When I was,
So it's understanding what it's like to do that. I don't know enough
Yeah.
about it, but it
Yeah.
feels to me that it is far less present than.
Yes.
We actually mentioned that in a report we did on mental health a couple of years ago, but we didn't do anything more than that.
Yeah.
the
Anyways.
cost is, I lived in San Francisco and they started having mobile toilets. The cost is outrageous.
Really?
It's because they have to be staffed the entire time they're there and usually by multiple people.
Yeah.
For
No, I mean, I
toilets or
believe
showers?
it.
Toilets.
Oh, no, I think you're talking about showers and haircuts, right?
I'm talking about showers, haircuts, laundry,
Ah.
bringing services.
Oh, okay.
Instead of relying
We're gonna be there for
on.
10
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thematically,
But those budgets, as they will change, is cheaper than doing housing.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said even those budgets are really high, whether there's toilet or showers, is that what they come back is that it's cheaper than doing housing.
Right,
Yeah, which
okay.
I just,
Mhm.
housing's a slow process and in the meantime.
Yeah. Not to say we shouldn't look into it.
It could be interesting
I
to
know you-
plan
I know you do.
the homeless.
Yeah. So we also, in that one meeting, we talked about also you know, and maybe one of us in this table can start an organization that rents or schedules after hours laundry mats. So people can come and do laundry. And that was
They can do that at
discussion we had
Paul's
about.
Place, actually. They can do that at Paul's Place. Every time I see someone on the street, I try to direct them to Paul's Place, but they don't listen.
Your laundromat's closed.
I have
Oh,
no
by the
idea.
way, I put the information that you email about October 22nd.
Yeah,
I think it's right in the chat.
okay, thank you. When I go home, perhaps I'll read the email that I was able to send to you.
And the closing of the proposed closing is October 31st, also on
Oh,
Halloween.
okay. Oh, my God. Oh, this is a council
But the
member.
hearing is on the 22nd. Hopefully, I'm planning to go.
Oh, okay. Maybe you can report back.
Not written, verbally, yeah.
Oh, come on, baby. Don't sell yourself short. Just write a laundry list. Tick, tick,
I'm
tick, tick.
overselling myself, actually. Anyway,
All right. There are so many things that we would like to address as a committee, which is great. Bailey House. Oh, this is another thing that at some point I'd like to show. There was some mention last night about SROs. Bailey House, which I think is now owned by Housing Works. Bailey House is on Christopher Street, and my understanding is that they're renovating it and turning it into a different kind of housing. I have to reach out to Bailey House.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with Bailey House. Where is that?
Bailey House is at the western end of Christopher Street.
Okay.
It used to be the Christopher Street Hotel or something like that.
Oh.
And in the 80s, it became housing for people with HIV and AIDS. And
it's a hospice, I think,
yeah, like a hospice, although it's changed because
for
it's
HIV.
long. And I think it's designed as a hotel. And, you know, we had them in and I didn't write a report and I don't know what I was thinking, but I remember nothing about it. But I see scaffolding outside the building and I think there's stuff going on there.
Is it
So
not recorded?
is what not recorded?
The meeting with Bailey?
I don't know. Doesn't matter. We'll have them in again. It was a while ago. Shush, shush. We'll have them in again. So we have to have them in again anyway because we have to
Yeah, yeah,
understand what
yeah.
they're doing with the building.
Yeah. So I assume
I
if
didn't have
they
to admit
changed,
that. I
if
just
they
chose
changed,
to admit that.
if they changed the type, then they probably would have had to go to land use or get a new permit.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing, so we're gonna find out.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
But knowing what their plan is would be good. It would be a good time to get an update on their plan. All right, so I think that this would merit an investigatory phone call to see if it's worth having them come in if they're doing something. Because most people don't call us, you know. No, you know, like DHS calls us if they're gonna plan a shelter because they have to notify us, but you know, how often does that happen? That doesn't happen.
Once every 12 years.
Yeah, it hasn't happened very often, so I'll just summarize the things that we've been talking about. We've been talking about a meeting that might be a bigger picture meeting about improving homeless services, which might be a meeting with DHS, Coalition for the Homeless, Housing Works, Open Hearts Initiative, some combination thereof, where we sort of tease out what's going on and what can happen. Be heard and INT, maybe something about their efficacy and if there's been consideration to bring Be Heard to this district and IMT and where that stands.
We should talk to Patrick's office about that, I think,
Yes,
because
yes.
they were
Very
requesting it.
A conversation with Housing Works. I think that should be start with an investigatory phone call to Housing Works. Like, you know, what could you tell us if we had a meeting about the revenue from your cannabis operation and where that's going? Someone calls, call them. Bellevue, what is going to happen post MSBI? And I'm going to ask Ritu about that. Moya and maybe DHS as well, an update on the migrants. Something on public toilets and mobile showers, and I'm not sure how we get at that. We'll have to figure out how to get at that. And then I have a note about something involving the DA's program or court navigators or multi-agency program in WSP in Washington Square Park, to sort of tease out what's going on there. And I would put that as a high priority, frankly. And then a phone call to Bailey House to see if they're doing anything here. Yes?
What was did you include the Mayor's Office of Community Mental Health and Beaver in that?
Yes, DOH&H, yes, DOH&H.
That was
That's
for, so
That would be 8 meetings if we get them.
And these
That's a
aren't in
year's worth
any
of work.
particular order, right?
No, I would love to get at Washington Square Park sooner than later, though.
Yeah,
I
I
really-
agree.
I think that's.
I think I missed, who do you want to bring in for Washington Square?
Well, there's these 2 programs, and I'm trying to understand what's going on with them. Will Morrison tells me that there is indeed a program being piloted in Washington Square Park that's a multi-agency program. And it is sort of with the DA's office, but it's sort of with NYPD, and he gave me a couple of contacts to.
Yeah, definitely.
And they mentioned last night this program. There's another program that I've heard of, and I think that, and I'm in touch with them, that is a DA's program that's also a multi-agency program, and I think it's a different initiative, because I think that one is not actually happening at Washington Square Park, and I'd like to understand what that relationship is, but something around that.
I mean, that could be, did we already say what October was gonna be?
That was it.
That, we were hoping for that for
Oh,
October.
okay, oh, great, I
If
totally
I could
missed
get that
yes.
done, I don't
think that's
know,
great.
I mean, I do have a phone conversation with her scheduled for Monday, I think, so I could work on that. I don't have much time, but we'll work on that. Okay,
Do we have to go into business session and vote on something?
oh yeah, thank you. Okay, guys, now we have to quiet you all. No, we don't have to, yeah, we have to quiet you all, because we're gonna go into business session.
I don't think there's anyone to
The
quiet.
plan, Carter Booth put in the chat, the plans for Bailey House at that time, including plans for BSA variance to make it financially feasible, but again, not pursued. Carter Booth says Bailey House began the engagement late 2019, early 2020 on the change, but COVID derailed their plans, not pursued at the time. Okay, we'll look it up.
Thank you.
All right, we are now in business session. We're gonna take a vote on whether we want to have a resolution that supports, that finds a general language to support, or the organizations that serve our community.
Yes, in particular that help people get into home and permanent shelters, and calling out the programs of a variety of the organizations we've seen over the year.
Okay, all in favor?
just to be
Yeah.
clear, do we have a list of are they just the ones that
We've talked about them, but I think what's gonna happen now is we'll take a vote, and then Zach will draft something, and then we'll look at it, and we'll put feedback.
Correct.
And
On
we
like a
will-
Google Doc.
And we'll aim to come to consensus on it. So if that means pulling a name from it, or changing some language from it, or something like that, we'll have that time. And then if people don't want to vote for it, they'll say no,
Okay.
which you always can do.
So should we vote on it now?
So we should vote on, I think we already did. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Anyone against? Any abstentions or recusals? All right. I think we can adjourn this meeting unless there's anything anyone else would like to
I
talk
have
about.
a very small idea.
Yeah.
Just to plant the seed, and we don't need to go into it much, but as you can tell, I'm often frustrated with the elected officials who come to the community board meeting. And I would like us to start moving to change the paradigm, because they're coming and they're prepared with like some random talking points. And then we're asking them questions about things that are relevant to us, but they didn't think about it. And then there's not really like a circle of follow-up there. So what I would like to do, or like us to consider, is maybe in future meetings, we think about what our specific asks of the elected officials are, and even go as far to email it to their office ahead of time to say, like, we would like you to come and talk to us about this thing. And at least do it on our committee, because a lot of the stuff that we look at is like city policy related.
Yeah, we can do it for our committee.
We are like looking for answers that are not immediately accessible.
I mean, we can also have offline conversations. We can, we can call their office, we know them. So I think, yeah,
I think it's a great idea. I think like we should have like just like we had here priorities, and just say, when you come, give us a report on what you're supporting with social workers on the ground. Give us a report, like, just like top 3 things that are important to us, and then they could talk about everything else they want. Halloween.
I think this is actually something that should be raised at exec.
Yes.
I think that the committee as a whole, the board as a whole should be doing that.
Yeah, I feel a little nervous about like what we intend to achieve with like something like that versus like the various options that you mentioned, Susanna. I wouldn't want to make them necessarily feel like on the spot unless we thought that we would actually get something that we wanted from that.
I don't think it has to be confrontational.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to avoid. Yeah.
Could you, at the next meeting, could you share with us the plans to add more trash cans? Something that you're working on that we would like to know about. I mean, Deborah Glick was wonderful in many ways, and she served on the environmental committee. This is a public meeting. But she served on the environmental committee for the state, and she talked to us a lot at one point about the birds crashing into the
And the
wall.
horse meat.
And the bees.
The horse meat.
And the bees, and which is interesting, but it really isn't relevant to our district. So to your point, saying, listen, what we're really interested in what you're doing is these 3 things. Let's talk about those instead. It's not
Especially if we're making recommendations, that's the way we follow up through the year. And I think they need that also as guidance, because I've seen a couple of them come in last minute and they're just talking, you'll have water when it rains, to that kind of conversation. It makes me crazy. But if we're making recommendations that we want to be kind of repeated in their conscious through the year, that's a great way to do it. To say, when you come in, top three things that we would like to hear that are developing or that's still on your table.
It might be the
And then
same
go
list,
into
like,
whatever.
month after month.
Yeah.
Depending on what, but I was reluctant to have this go to exec first, because I think it would be good to pilot like with a committee
Sure, we
and
could
see
do
if
that.
there's a,
Sorry, I agree. I think there's 2 problems. One is the problem that they come and they talk about stuff that isn't relevant and it takes up all the time. The other is that we ask about stuff that they're not prepared to answer. I think that you can't really do the second without addressing the first, because if we send them in advance stuff that we're curious about as a committee, like they're still gonna come and filibuster with the stuff they have prepared.
Yeah.
I think it should be brought up at exec to reform how we do elected updates, where like they are limited to 2 minutes each with their updates, and any board member can fill out a Google form in advance with a question they have for a certain elected's rep or something, so that they know what we're gonna ask or they know what we're curious to hear about. But I get the idea of like piloting with one of us, but if we're just adding on stuff that we're putting in front of them without toggling on the other side to reduce the wasted time, I think that's just a recipe for more talking.
I guess I'm just more optimistic that people are coming to talk about like what they think is going to be interesting. I don't think that like if you were to ask some of these electeds like what the community board cares most about, I don't think they know the answer to that question. I think they're like just used to this, like, I'm just gonna talk about this general stump speech topic that I'm gonna,
for lack of understanding,
that I'm gonna give anywhere.
I think that there's another problem, which is that we don't know everything that they're doing.
We do
right?
not.
So they come in and they tell us everything that
they're
they're
excited
doing,
about.
Right.
right? So they tell us about legislation they passed and blah, 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 and we didn't know that before, right? So, so it's not always easy to predict what we should be asking about, because if we don't know what they've been doing, it's hard to know what to ask about. I do think that our concerns are usually top of mind for them because they get phone calls from people all the time.
Right.
You know, I used to call Pat, I can call, if I don't know what to talk about, I'll call Eric Foster's office and say, what should we be talking about? You know, no, seriously, because they get phone calls, you know, they're getting complaints all the time. They know what's top of mind for their constituents.
So like, I like the idea. I think there's like, getting it right may take a little bit of tinkering.
Yeah.
Like exec committee or like a committee or something, so that they're also not inundated with like
Yes.
questions, not random, but just an overload of
Like it
questions.
coming to the committee
Yeah, that's why on a committee, that's why I would be really reluctant to be like at an individual member perspective, because then I think we would end up sending like 60 questions in advance, and that's not helpful because it just becomes a document that people toss away.
So why don't you consider some questions that, I mean, anyone, I don't ever have questions for them, but if you consider questions that you'd like to ask, and consolidate them and send them to their office.
And you can ask them to include these questions exclusively and give other stuff they want to.
2 minutes.
Even if it's an elected themselves, they should also get.
I would like them to
Great.
say, we don't want to know what's going on. I mean, they talk about, these events. A lot of talk about on this day, we're gonna do this.
It's difficult with electeds. This meeting last night of the NYPD, the 6th Precinct Community College, right? So they had all the electeds came, which is great, right? People love that the electeds are there to hear them. But when you have elected officials, they make statements. They're used to making statements. So that was 6 people making statements. By the time they were done, there was really no time for questions, and people got very, very frustrated.
Right.
And I was thinking, like, how do you manage that? Because on the one hand, you really do want your elected officials to be there listening. And on the other hand, and your elected officials coming to tell the community what they've been doing on their behalf. But at the same time, when Arlena and Eric and Brad, and each one takes 6 minutes, there goes the hour.
Mm.
So it's tricky.
Okay, well, maybe we can not yet bring it, send it, but maybe we can try just doing an exercise of like what type of questions could be. And I can create like a very simple sheet,
Okay.
splitting between like state and city and other of these confusing positions that come sometime. And just to see like, if we were to ask questions, what
Yeah,
those
what would
questions
they
might
be?
look like, but we don't need to share that with anyone,
That's
just
fine.
ourselves.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's terrific. Is there anything else anyone would like to talk about? No?
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, and thanks for
Thank you.
always having really good ideas. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Good night.
Night.
At